In this lesson, we're going to look at manipulating strings and pulling data. So we've done about 12 or 13 lessons so far, and we've learned pretty much everything there is to know about the basics of programming in Python. So this next series of lessons is going to look at just taking those skills a little bit further. So one of the things I always say to all of my students, if you want to be great programmers, you have to know the documentation. And there's a lot of really good websites out there. There's a lot of bad ones as well. So the first place I would look is probably the python.org documentation, and this can show you lots and lots of the different built-in functions and lots of the different methods that are available. Another one that I really like is this one here, this W3 Schools, and as you can see, you've got lots going on. So I've come over to the Python page, and I'm looking at these built-in functions and these string methods, and a lot of what we're going to do today is built around these. But if you want to know more than just the 12 that I'm going to show you today, you can come in and you can have another look, and each one of these is filled with examples. So if you say, oh, how does count work, you can click on that and it will show you some examples of how it works. As you can see, there are absolutely hundreds of these things. Some will be ridiculously useful for your needs. Some you might think to yourself, oh, I'll never need that. And then one day it'll be like, oh, I do need that. And so just have a look through these and try a few of them out. So let's move on. So today's lesson then, manipulating strings and pulling data. So it's all about how you deal with strings and how you deal with storing data. So if I start a new variable called myString, and we'll use this variable for all of our programming kind of examples here, and I'm going to set this out in a very unique way. So I'm going to say hello world, and notice that there are capitals there. Notice that there's a space in front and behind, and I'm also going to put this little colon here as well, comma here as well. So this will kind of allow me to use multiple of these different methods for manipulating strings. So the first one I want to show you guys is how to kind of pull data from a string. So we have our print statement, which we use for everything, and this is just going to be used for a kind of example. And like we did when we used lists, if we want to pull an item from a list, we'd use square brackets, and it's the same for a string. So we're calling our data, and then we're calling a square bracket. Now each character in a string is an item, and it can be pulled like that as well. So if I say, right, let's pull out item 2. So remember, it always starts from 0 and then it goes 1 and 2. So in this particular example, we should have it returned as an E. So if I just run this now, save it as well, and let's just move this to one side so we can see it fully. So as you can see, it's pulled out the E that we wanted, and that's a really handy technique. So any of those elements there, so let's pull out number 8 for instance and run that again, and now we should get another item from that string. So in this case it's the W. And you can keep doing that. One thing you should keep in mind is if you go out of range, you will get an error, and this is quite a common thing. And the first thing my students do is they chuck their hands up and say, oh sir, I've got an error, and it's basically saying, look, nothing exists in this that's item 99. Item 99 does not exist. So you are going to have to look at these out of range errors and just make sure you're very, very aware of that. So another thing you can do is you can pull a range. So you can say, right, pull range 0 all the way through to 5. Now remember, it won't pull 5, it will pull 4, and then it will stop. So it will go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it will get to the L, but it won't pull the O. So let's just test that as well. So let's run that again. And there we go. So it will always call the first number, but it won't call that very last value. Another thing you can do to make sure, so say for instance if our string changed and all of a sudden it had 500, 600, 700 words in it or characters in it, but you wanted to analyze every single value in that, you could just leave this last bit empty, and by leaving it empty it will evaluate all the way to the end. And it's the same for this. You really don't need to put 0, because if you wanted to calculate it from 0 to 4, leaving it blank and putting 4 afterwards like that would do exactly the same thing. It would give you that range. I tend not to do it that way, but it's up to you. But this is very, very handy. So let's just do that now. So you should get the full printout. Okay, so there you go. The hello world is there, and even if I continue typing, so I'll put a load more characters in here and I run that again, because it's allowed to grow infinitely, it will actually populate that for me. Okay, so the next one we need then, let's just get rid of that, make sure we keep it the same. The next one we need then is to strip data. So we've kind of put this data in there now, but what happens if we want to strip these white spaces? And there is a built-in function called strip, and how you call this function is a dot syntax. Dot syntaxes are really useful when you want to kind of put things together. In this case, we're putting together the string with the function. So we're saying my string dot strip. And because it's a function, we do need these two brackets, so we're getting a couple of brackets here at the end. This won't be so obvious to see, but when you're analyzing data, say for instance a user kind of puts in a load of old jargon, and you say, look, although they put 20 blank spaces at the beginning because they wanted to format it a certain way, and 20 blank spaces at the end because they wanted to format it a way, the computer only wants the data without the spaces. So it's a really good way of error checking as well. So by using this strip, it just says, look, get rid of all the data before the words, or before the string starts and after the string. So when we run that, although you probably won't see very much, it has actually removed all of the, oh yes, you can see it. So if you look at the example above, you can see that that's there, and you can see that that's there, but then below it's got rid of all of that data. So that's what strip does. The next one then is called length. So we want to find out the length of a string. So we can just say print the length, and it works slightly differently, and you're going to see this a lot. Sometimes it uses the dot syntax, sometimes it doesn't. For this particular one, we're going to call len, and then inside of the brackets we're going to call my string. And I'll give you a list of all these examples in just a second so you can see them all back to back as well. But let's just run that, and then that will give you a printed value, a number for how, sorry, it's cutting the screen off. It will give you a printed value for how long that particular string is. So it's saying, right, that string is 15 characters. Okay, so there's another one. So length we use a lot of. So if we want to evaluate a number and whether it's actually bigger than 0, we can compare that bit of data as well and say, hey, is it bigger than 0? So the next one, another piece of error checking, is if we want to see if our string is, or if we want to convert our string to lowercase or uppercase. Now what we can say here, if we just get rid of this len option, we can say my string dot lower. And once again, this is a built-in function, but when it prints out my string, it will get rid of this H as an uppercase, and it will get rid of this W as an uppercase. And this is really cool. If say for instance, like in one of our quizzes where a user can input yes or no, but for some reason the user puts a capital Y instead of just a lowercase, it will take that into consideration and it will change it, which is really, really useful. So when we print this time, you'll notice that my hello world now has no capitals. And it's the same for uppercase as well. We can just say string.upper, and then it will convert it to upper. So depending on how you want to error check that, you can either convert it to lower or you can convert it to upper. There is another one that allows you just to do the first letter, but I haven't got that on me at the moment. So let's look at another one which is called replace. So replace is really cool. So say for instance you want to replace the H with a J, you can do that. Now it is case sensitive, and you do need to make sure that they are string values. So don't forget your strings. And if you don't have any capitals, it will be case sensitive. And this is one of those cases where you can actually convert to upper and then do this if you wanted to. So here we go. Let's try that. So now we should have Jello World, which is always good. So the next one we want to do is split. We want to split our function or our data into 2 strings. So let's get rid of this again. So this time let's just say dot split. Now the dot split method, you do need to kind of identify where you want to split it. So what I tend to do, I'll keep doing that. is we're going to split it at the comma here, okay? It tends to always write the commas because a comma is also the way of denoting whether it's an item in a list, if you remember. So if you weren't going to use the item and you were just going to use a blank space, for instance, you would still see that there are lots of commas that come up. So just for this example, and if just to make it look right, you'll notice that I'm just going to put a comma. But if you wanted to stop it at every space, which actually can be really useful, maybe we should do that, because if you wanted to break it up into separate words and then reorder the words, this could be really useful. So you can say, right, split it for each word, and then that becomes a list of its own. Yeah, probably a bit too much at this particular point, but yeah, let's run it anyway, and then you'll see that it creates a list of 2 items out of that string. And there we go, we have our list. And we can save that, remember. At the moment we're just printing it, but we can save this as another list, or we can save it as a list and store that data, which is really, really useful. Moving on then, so the final one we're going to look at is going to be isAlpha. And this is a really useful one for data checking as well. So you can see if a user hasn't put in an alphabetical character, it will just chuck up an error. It will say, no, I'm sorry, what you've put in there is false. So this is called isAlpha. So hopefully I spelled alpha right. Yeah, that's right. So it's another dot syntax. So my string is alpha. So you can say, if my string is alpha, do something. If it's not, don't do it. In this particular instance, it should return false because we've got blank space here, we've got this little comma here, and we've got this here as well. So all of those things are not alphabetical, so it will return false. And there we go. So it returned it false, which is a great way of checking if it's alphabetical or not. So let's put some of this into action. Let's just, I've got a little list here, so let's just copy this out, so Control C, and let's just place it here, and let's show you what's going to happen here. So I still need my if statement, so undo that again. One more time. So here we go. So we're going to evaluate my string. So say if length of my string is greater than 0, and if you imagine this was an input statement, if it's greater than 0, you can do something, and my string first character is equal to h, give me this. If it's not, give me this. So what this basically says is, using this AND operator here, if this piece of data is right and this piece, true, and this piece of data is true, then you can print this. If both pieces of data are not true, then you can't. And that's using this AND parameter. And we haven't really looked at that before. But we could have also said something like this. We could have also said, if length of my string is greater than 0, do this. But I just wanted to put in that AND character as well, just so you can see it in action. And we could have also done this as well. So we could have also said, if my string is first item, or number 1 item, is equal to h. And they would both work, and it's absolutely fine. So let's just run that. And we're comparing that data to make sure that the string isn't empty. And voila. And compares 2 pieces of data, and if both are true, this gets printed. Let's try another one that we need to use. So it's the OR. So if I copy this piece of data over here, and we come into OR and print it. So if my string dot is alpha, or my string is upper, hello world, print this, else print this. Now, this at the moment won't work because we haven't converted it to upper. So we can just say, we can just reinitialize this. So say my string is assigned to my string dot upper. Okay, so because it's it will read this piece of information first, then it will pass this piece of information into here, converting it to upper. If it doesn't work, we might just have to put a little 1 here, but I'm pretty sure it will. And that will convert this to uppercase, which means that this is true. and this isn't true because this has got a little comma there, so this is actually not true, but because we're using the or, not the and, only one of these pieces of information has to be true. So let's just run that again. And there you go. Or compares two pieces of data, and if one of them is true, it gets printed as true. Okay, so that's pretty much as far as we are going to take this one. But before I go, I just want to kind of show you all of that data that we've just looked at, and we'll print it out once and for all, just so you can see it. Let me get rid of that line of code there. So here are all the different ones that we've been looking at here, and you can see how they work. And I'll leave you a copy of this so you can have a little play around with this and see it. But one final run before we move on to our challenge. So there we go, all 12. Fantastic. So I'll see you in the next lesson for the challenge.